We look at 2024 winners and losers for the Baltimore Ravens through 1 week of 2024 free agency. We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like this video, subscribe to the channel, also in audio form wherever you get your shows. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you prefer to listen. We're here for you Monday through Friday. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. 5 days per week here on Locked On Ravens as we provide you that daily Ravens content, news, analysis, updates, the whole 9 yards, both in video form and audio form. So we are there for you whenever you need. Even we do some bonus content like live shows after every single piece of big Ravens news. Even during the season, we do live reaction after every game. So be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member that we have their Ravens coverage right here on Locked On Ravens. We're officially past the 1 week mark of free agency, at least the legal tampering period aspect of it. Obviously, free agency started on Monday in terms of teams being able to talk with free agents legally in terms of getting everybody on the same page and offering contracts, accepting contracts. But we're now a week into that. And I want to dive into some early free agency winners and some free agency losers for the Ravens. And I think that it's important to kind of take it in steps, in intervals. So obviously some of the names and some of the position groups that are listed out here today, they might not necessarily be winners or losers by the time we're talking about this, maybe in a month, maybe before the season starts, because we're still, again, very early in the process. Baltimore's only added Derrick Henry from the outside. They've obviously re-signed a couple of guys. So we'll talk about the winners in the first part of the show, get into the losers in the second part of the show. Then in the final part, I want to get into just who's still available, who the Ravens could add, who they could bring back. There are still options for them in all regards. A bunch of different categories that the Ravens could attack here in free agency. As again, we're only 1 week in. There's still a lot of other opportunities. I guess technically we're a week and a day in because we are, the show comes out on Tuesday, but I'm recording this on Monday night. So it counts. It counts as a week in free agency where I'm recording it. But let's dive into the winners first of all here. I think we have to start with Lamar Jackson. Now, the Ravens haven't added a pass catcher. They did re-sign Nelson Aguilar. I think that was a win for Lamar. But adding Derrick Henry just gives you so much and adds so much to the offense, stuff we've been talking about pretty much every day. So if you're an everydayer, shout out to you. Appreciate you tuning in every day to the channel. You've heard me talk about it, where it just opens up so much more for Lamar. And I think a lot of people, when they look at the Derrick Henry signing, it's it's only in the run game. But I tend to differ on that. And I say, well, it's not just in the run game. It's the pass game also, because I think the play action is more effective, especially if defenses are already stressing out about who's going to get the ball on RPOs or play action plays where they actually hand the ball off. Well, I guess play action technically easy, throw the ball, but in terms of actual handoffs, but on play action plays, when you drop back, Lamar is going to have defenses already creeping up to the line because if Derrick Henry's on the field, all right, now we got to put some guys up in the box to stop Derrick Henry. We have to creep up towards the line, even if we don't know if the ball's getting handed off or not. So on those play action plays versus just a straight handoff, it's going to be so hard for the defense to stay true. And that's one of the ways that defenses can beat the Ravens. It's disciplined football. And I think that adding Derrick Henry makes it so much harder for defenses to stay disciplined, whether it's trying to bring down Derrick Henry in the run game, bring down Lamar in the run game, or just try to stay disciplined on those looks, because we know Zay Flowers can win one-on-one. Rashad Bateman with more opportunities, he can win. We've seen that before too. So I think that it helps Lamar both from a running aspect, obviously, but also him as a passer. I think Derrick Henry's just presence on the field might open up some stuff, especially over the middle for guys like Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. I think those guys are big winners in that regard. We also have to talk about Derrick Henry as a winner as well. I think the situation he's coming into, the way the Ravens run the football, and now going into a place where, again, he's going to be the bell cow in Baltimore, but it's going to be more of a more of a controlled thing where he's not going to have to be taking 300 carries in a Ravens uniform every season. That was what it ended up having to be in Tennessee. The lowest total for Derrick Henry in 4 of the last 5 years, and 4 of those years he was healthy out of the 5, 280, and that was last season. So Derrick Henry, he is 30 years old, right? He's not 2019 Offensive Player of the Year Derrick Henry, but you want to manage his workload, not only manage it in terms of like, oh, give him 10 carries a game, keep him fresh. You want to give Derrick Henry probably 20 plus carries every game, 18 plus carries every game, because that's just who Derrick Henry is. He's still a top 5 running back in this league, and you want to give your best players the football. And obviously, look, we know the Ravens didn't do it in the AFC Championship game, but if they are in that situation again, you cannot leave Derrick Henry off the field. Henry loves the Ravens' physicality. He said as much. He loves how the Ravens play football. I think it's a great fit for Derrick Henry. He also got a pretty decently sized contract, all things considered, in terms of the running back position. Wasn't quite what a Saquon or Josh Jacobs got, but still $8 million per season. That can go up to $10 million per season with incentives. He still did pretty good for himself, and I think he's in a great situation now where he's not going to be relied upon to be the focal point of this offense. Obviously, that's Lamar, and Derrick Henry can work off of that. And as Derrick Henry said in his introductory press conference, he wants to be a piece for Lamar and for this offense. So I think that's good. I also think Rashad Bateman's been a winner so far. Baltimore, at the time of this recording, has not brought in another free agent receiver. I think they are going to at some point. But again, for right now, Rashad Bateman is really penciled in there as that pure number 2 receiver, Zay Flowers being the 1. And I think that's a good balance of what it's been for Bateman over the past 2 seasons. Right in 2022, he was kind of thrust into that wide receiver 1 role, and the Ravens, quite honestly, should not have done that. They should have added other receivers that could help Bateman and not thrust him into that role, but obviously it didn't happen, and it backfired on him. 2023, Bateman was kind of like the number 3 wide receiver, I guess, behind Zay and Odell. But again, I think this is a good balance for him, where I think if the Ravens add a receiver, and look, I'd be fine if Bateman goes back to being like a 2B to a 2A in this offense, if the Ravens bring in a quality talent like that. But this is make it or break it for Bateman this season. And I think them not adding somebody right now, at least early on, right, things can change. And I expect it to with the Ravens adding somebody. But for right now, I do think Rashad Bateman is a winner. I also think the Ravens' young offensive linemen are all winners here. We're going to talk about this a little bit more throughout the show. But I do think that guys like Ben Cleveland and Andrew Voorhees and Saleh and Daniel Faalele, the Ravens have seen 3 starting offensive linemen leave from last year's team. They saw John Simpson and Morgan Moses both go to the Jets. Simpson just signed there, and Moses obviously in that trade. Kevin Zeitler signed with the Lions late last night, so that's a loss for the Ravens, but clearly the Ravens had no intention of bringing him back, and I think a lot of people kind of saw that writing on the wall once the Ravens didn't agree to an extension with Zeitler before his dead money hit. So that was pretty much, okay, yeah, they're probably not going to bring him back, and we had talked about that on the show. But again, the way that the free agent market has been, the Ravens, I don't know if they're going to be able to get a veteran. They should bring in a veteran. They should bring in at least one guy because, again, you're trusting guys like Cleveland and Saleh and Voorhees and Faalele. It's a win for them because, again, it shows early on at least that Baltimore does trust them, especially letting those guys walk. But we're probably going to see a guy added, right? We're going to see a tackle probably taken in the 1st or 2nd round, probably a guard, whether it's a guy that ends up coming in from free agency or the draft. So I think those guys are winners as well. I think on the defensive side of the ball, I think, one, Zach Orr is a winner for the Ravens being able to bring back Justin Madubuike on that defensive line. I think Orr, again, has lost some talent on his defense, Patrick Queen and Ronald Darby, et cetera, Geno Stone as well. But I do think Zach Orr, bringing back Justin Madubuike, he himself is a winner. Madubuike also a winner. I'll call the Ravens a winner too for signing Madubuike, just, Eric DeCosta in general. For signing Madubuike to that extension before Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins got their deals. So major shout out because, again, Madubuike still got an awesome contract, but would have probably cost him a lot more if they had waited after the Jones and Wilkins deals. I also think that Trenton Simpson so far, right? Patrick Queen leaves. He's going to be slotting in now. At least he's the heir apparent to that Patrick Queen spot next to Roquan. I think that's going to be big. And then other than that, I don't see a ton of winners on defense. I'm trying to think of, I guess, for now, Odafe Owe and particularly David Ojabo, I guess, is a winner because they haven't brought in a veteran edge. I expect that to change, obviously, but, we can talk about it for now with both Clowney and Van Noy not back and then not adding somebody. I do think right now David Ojabo is a winner. I think Todd Monken also, we can talk about the coordinators. I talked about Zach Orr. I can flip it back to the offensive side of the ball for a bit, talk about Todd Monken. them adding in Derrick Henry is a big move for him. And hopefully, a little more runs and big moments, AFC Championship game, cough. But I do think that they have a plan. John Harbaugh said as such. And look, they have to execute it, and it has to be a good one. But look, adding Derrick Henry is an upgrade from Gus Edwards and, J.K. Dobbins as well. And I think that's going to be huge for Baltimore in the long game. Coming up, though, we're going to be talking about the other side of this coin, talking about free agency losers for the Ravens. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on this episode of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. There are plenty of times I've had a frustrating ticket buying experience. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Other times I come from last-minute tickets. Sometimes there are no good deals at all, but you shouldn't have to worry about all that when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, use your receipt, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. On the Gametime app. Opening day for those Orioles, it's coming up. Plus, there are plenty of concerts in the Baltimore area as well. Gametime has used all the seats in the venue on the app, which is a great tool to use. Plus, Gametime is the only ticket in the app that gives you a complete peace of mind with the purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They have all-in prices that show you the total up front, so you know what you're getting, and a great deal at that before you check out. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on their tickets as well. With zone deals, big session, and Gametime picks seats for big-time savings. Hit the guys are going to buy and tickets with Gametime down the Gametime app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Send apply again. Create an account with team code LOCKEDON spelled LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime to the last minute. Tickets lowest price guaranteed. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here on this Taco Tuesday. Really appreciate everybody again for tuning in with me here today and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We talked about the winners for Baltimore and free agency through the first week of 2024 free agency. Let's get into the losers now, because again, with the winners, obviously you got to flip it over and talk about the losers. Now, I do think, I don't know, the Ronnie Stanley contract, I do think ended up being a net loss for Ronnie just because of the insecurity of the contract now, where his base salary does decrease. He can earn it back in incentives. And look, he helped out the Ravens. I think the organization, I think it was a big move for Ronnie Stanley. I have a lot of respect for him for doing it. But the fact that he's not going to be able to collect that money, and we don't really know what is going to be this year after Ronnie Stanley, what happens? Is he going to play really well? Is he going to earn another contract? I don't know if he was going to get, he had another, I think, $26 million cap hit next year. I don't think he's going to get that, right? He's getting up there in age a little bit. Injuries have taken their toll on him. I'm not sure he's going to get a contract like that, even if he plays really well next season for the Ravens. So I think that for Baltimore, that was a win. But for Stanley, while I respect it, I respect him a ton for making that sacrifice. I do think it was a net loss for him in terms of the monetary gain of that, because now you're a free agent after this year. You cut that last year, your deal off, and there's a lot less long-term security there for Ronnie. I guess if you want, like, if we want to have this conversation, we can. I guess Justice Hill is a loser in this whole thing with them bringing in Derrick Henry. They were always going to add or bring back a running back. I don't think they were going to just hand Justice Hill the keys. But, I mean, I guess there was a possibility of it happening. I guess it wasn't a non-zero chance. I don't think Justice really is a loser in all this, just because of how he can work off of Derrick Henry, be the change of pace or number two back behind him, or even, and that's before Keaton Mitchell comes back. But I guess, if you're Justice Hill, it's not going to be quite the rotation anymore, right? Derrick Henry is going to be your bell cow, and you're going to be the number two. It's not quite a Gus Hill situation or Gus Hill Mitchell where it might be pretty even, or one guy might get one or two carries here or there. Henry's going to be dominating the majority of those carries, and it's really not going to be close there. I think another loser in this situation, it's weird to say this, but I do think the Ravens corner room has been a loser so far. I really didn't like them not bringing back Ronald Darby. I thought he was really big. It has nothing to do with Brandon Stevens, nothing to do with Marlon Humphrey, but you can't trust Jalen Armour-Davis and Pepe Williams right now, right? I guess if you're talking about winners so far, those two are, because you haven't brought anybody back if you're the Ravens. You haven't added anybody if you're the Ravens. So to me, I think that those two are winners, but the corner room as a whole is a loser because you lost a really talented player, Ronald Darby. Arthur Mudd has not re-signed yet, but again, we're still very early on. So it's hard to kind of dictate who's a winner and who's a loser at this very point. We can only go off of what we know. the Ravens might sign a corner literally today after I record this, and we will revisit the conversation and say, okay, look, it looks really good now. So I don't know. It's very difficult to kind of gauge how it looks, but what I do know is the Ravens corner room, they did lose a very good player there in Ronald Darby. I would kind of, that's probably it. I mean, I guess the offensive line has lost a lot so far. I wouldn't necessarily call them losers, but I guess if we're talking about the talent they've lost, I think them not re-signing Kevin Zeitler, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the final part of the show, but I think that was not a move that I would have personally made. Now, again, it feels like the Ravens want to get younger on their offensive line. They understand a lot of these guys aren't new pieces, but I think that an offensive line rebuild was coming, right? It was coming. So I thought that John Simpson was definitely going to be on the way out or re-sign as a backup. I thought Morgan Moses had the potential to be moved on from. I did expect Zeitler back. I expected Stanley to come back too, honestly, but I don't know. It just feels like Baltimore does want to get younger and more athletic on their line. But now you have to make sure that those guys, right? With Kevin Zeitler, he was an incredible pass blocker, right? Really good in pass protection, mauler in the run game, a leader in that room. You got to find somebody with all those traits, right? You get multiple people with all those traits now. So that's my thing with losing good players. Is it stinks, right? It does. But at the end of the day, this is kind of what Baltimore envisioned. I do not disagree with them trying to figure out how to reshape this line. I think it was needed in a way, but I probably would have brought back Zeitler. I think it would have, Zeitler got, I think, a deal up to $10 million. I don't actually know the incentives or what the actual monetary value was. I don't know that right now, but I still think that that's probably a move I would have made. So it stings, but again, it was inevitable. If it wasn't this year, it was going to probably be next year. So they're just getting a head start, seeing what they can do and kind of jumpstarting that rebuild a little bit more on the offensive line. But obviously I think Ronnie Stanley, if he's not extended, is going to be gone next season, and that'll be that there. Other than that, I don't really see a lot of other losers. I mean, the Ravens need to add wide receivers still. I think that room outside of Rashad Bateman, I mean, again, it's nothing against Zay Flowers, right? I mean, Odell has been someone that was a great leader for them, but he penned that farewell to the Ravens. So I don't think, I don't think he's back in the fold. In fact, I know for a fact he's probably not back in the fold because of that letter. But yeah, I don't think it's been a terrible free agency for the Ravens. I get that they have lost a lot of players. I get that you can look to that as a negative point and call the Ravens losers because they have lost so many players. But at the end of the day, we're so early into the process where I don't want to overreact too much and all of a sudden say, oh, well, they're never going to fix this. They're never going to do it. I mean, again, we saw them sign Jadeveon Clowney just a couple weeks before the season started last year. We saw them sign Kyle Van Noy literally in season. Week 3, he was on his couch. The Ravens signed him. Both Clowney and Van Noy had 9.5 sacks, or 9 sacks and 9.5 sacks, excuse me. So I think that Baltimore has had a pretty good offseason so far. I understand, again, the pure shock value of losing. I will say one loser who is not with the Ravens anymore. I did not understand Tyler Huntley's decision to go to Cleveland. I didn't get it. Apparently, it was a veteran minimum contract. He's the 3rd quarterback, maybe even the 4th quarterback on that team. I think we were all kind of thinking, I know I was thinking, oh, okay, Tyler Huntley is going to try to get a starting opportunity or go to a place where he can challenge at least to be a starter, have a chance to be a starter. I just don't know why you wouldn't re-sign with the Ravens. Again, maybe the Ravens just didn't offer him, right? They just didn't offer him a contract and said, we don't really, it's been great, but we don't want you here anymore. So maybe that was the situation, but I did not understand him going to Cleveland where it's not even like a division thing. It's just like they have so many different quarterbacks there. I didn't understand. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I did not think it was a good free agency for Tyler Huntley personally. Geno Stone, the vision went to an opportunity. There's an opportunity for playing time there. Patrick Queen went to an opportunity, playing time opportunity in Pittsburgh. Tyler Huntley, I think at least wanted to have a shot to compete for a starting job. I don't know, maybe his market just wasn't great and he settled for what he could get, but I think that was not a great free agency for Tyler Huntley. Coming up, though, we're going to be talking about who else the Ravens can add in free agency, get a little bit in depth into who is still available on the market. We'll also talk about the Ravens' remaining free agents, who they could re-sign still. Stay tuned, a lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost in every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Let's keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers and subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is registered broker-dealer. We are back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher is still talking with you here on this Tuesday. Again, as always, appreciate everybody for being here with me today on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to subscribe in video form and in audio form. You can listen and watch both ways. It's the same show, audio and video. So if you want to watch one day, listen another day, we have you covered here on Locked On Ravens. Let's talk about free agency and who else the Ravens can add. And I think it is still important for Baltimore to add, right? They've lost a lot of players, and it's important for Baltimore to, and specifically Eric Costa, right, to have the offseason that he had last year. We talked about it. We did multiple shows on this, where despite how important last offseason was for the Ravens, I mean, you can argue that this offseason is either as important, if not more important. Now, last offseason had the quarterback element to it, where you just didn't know if Lamar was going to be with the team or not, but now with Lamar on the big contract, you have to figure out how to maximize the roster. You can't keep everybody, but you can, if you're lucky, hit on free agent signings like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a Kyle Van Noy, Ronald Darby, and Arthur Millette, and Nelson Aguilar, etc. Now, Kyle Van Noy and Jadeveon Clowney, Arthur Millette, those guys are all still free agents. Those three, I think, have more of a likelihood of coming back than, some of the Ravens' other bigger time free agents. As we talked about, Odell Beckham Jr. probably out the door. Wouldn't expect a guy like J.K. Dobbins back personally, but I don't know. I still think that there are avenues for one. I'd probably say one of Clowney and Van Noy, or Van Noy to come back. I don't know which one it would be. Feels like, Clowney's taking all these visits and having all these different meetings with teams. Van Noy and Clowney are both going to cost more money than they did in 2023. It is inevitable. Both guys have essentially said as such and have shown as such. It's going to cost a lot more money to have him back in a Ravens uniform if that's the case in 2024. But I do think it's important to bring, even just for continuity's sake, and the fact that you don't have a lot. We talked about David Ojabo and how he's a winner. Part of that's just because there's no one to challenge him for snaps, right? I think Ojabo has the potential, but you can't bank on that because he has had 2 seasons in the NFL. Both of them have been cut short due to injury, whether it was, the first year was obviously his pro day, but second year with the torn ACL, it's something you can't trust. You cannot go into the year with maybe you draft another edge rusher and that's that. You go into the year with Owe, Jabo, Robinson, and that young guy. Can't do it. You got to bring back a veteran. And I'd honestly bring back one of those guys and add somebody else. Now, in the corner room, I definitely add a veteran there. I think Arthur Millette you could bring back as a slot, but maybe they're more so looking to start with the Ardarius Washington stuff or draft a corner there. I do expect them to draft at least one corner personally, but I wouldn't mind a Stephon Gilmore or a Trey White. Now, I know Trey White's been, he's had the injuries, a couple serious injuries over the last couple of seasons, but it's a veteran like that who can fill that Ronald Darby role, can play on the outside, maybe gives you a little inside-out versatility. And that, I think, would be okay because, again, you have Marlon Humphrey, you have Brandon Stevens. Those are your 2 guys. But I would still want to add a veteran there. That's why I think with the way Darby played, I would have been over the moon if he was back with Baltimore. I think a lot of other people would have been too. But there are still other options for them to pivot to. Edge rusher, I mean, if we're talking about just going back to that conversation for a second, there are limited options remaining. Chase Young signed with the Saints yesterday, so I know a lot of people it kind of penciled him in. Zadarius Smith back with the Browns, Leonard Floyd off the market. A lot of these edge rushers are going, and there's not a lot left. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Ravens do just decide to bring back one of their own guys and then draft another player. I would still prefer them to add another guy in free agency, but I'm not necessarily sure. On the offensive line, it's, I'd expect it to be more so draft oriented. Maybe they make those signings like a Sam Mustipher, who actually did play well for them in a couple games when they needed him to, but I'm not expecting them to go out there and make a huge move there personally. I think that ship is probably sailed, and the offensive line class is so deep anyway. I wouldn't try to put too much on. I wouldn't try to force that issue because you know that there are still good enough offensive linemen for you in this class, and they're going to go through a rebuild. They're trying to get younger. I wouldn't expect them to sign a veteran to a 3-year deal. Maybe they do. Maybe they prove me wrong, but I'm not sure. Wide receiver wise, options are going off the board. Josh Reynolds, I believe, is still there from the Lions. He's the guy that a lot of people have penciled in for Baltimore, it seems like. There are still others as well, but I would expect them to sign one veteran receiver and then draft another guy, and that would be their 6 with Flowers, Bateman, Wallace, and also Aguilar, right? Aguilar's the guy. So those 4 guys plus a veteran and a rookie, I'd expect for that. But other than that, I don't think Baltimore is too in the market. Maybe a third safety. Jordan Poyer signed with the Dolphins, but maybe a Micah Hyde goes there. Maybe Eddie Jackson. There are options for filling in Geno Stone's role in Baltimore, where a guy you can play and rotate in on 3 safety looks and give guys breathers with, but he's not going to be the starter. Your starters are Marcus Williams and Kyle Hamilton. But yeah, I think other than maybe, I don't know, a veteran inside linebacker, just because Trenton Simpson is going to be the guy, hopefully next to Roquan, but wouldn't hurt to have some insurance there. And the inside linebacker market as a whole hasn't been super great in terms of money to begin with. I think a lot of players have gotten a lot less than anticipated. So I don't know what that looks like. If Blake Cashman is still available, I think Cashman would be an option from Houston. There are a couple of others as well, but I wouldn't expect that signing to break the bank. And Baltimore is, good at quarterback, good at running back, good at fullback, good at tight end, good on the D line. So they have a lot of holes filled for the most part. They also have 9 picks. I would expect them to kind of focus more so on the draft at this point, because that's just what Baltimore's MO is. But they are going to have to sign a couple veterans to replace the guys that they've lost, because they've lost a lot. I've talked about it all show. They've lost a whole heck of a lot. So they're going to have to replace that. And it's just a matter of how do you do it? Baltimore's been a team that values the draft. They also value free agency, but we know how much Eric DeCosta loves those picks. You know how much Ozzie Newsome loved those picks as well when he was running the show. So wouldn't shock me if Baltimore is, there's still players in it, and maybe they have one more medium size to big move in them, depending on if it's a free agent signing or a trade. But I would expect them to try to fill out the holes of their roster with some veterans, but also focus majorly on the draft. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, follow along audio form and video form. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Stay tuned. A lot to get to. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.